How many of you have used Uber? Show of hands. Okay, cool. And when you open the app, the first thing you're going to see is a huge map. So when Uber started out, right, I'm sure that when they were deciding on what to do, they did not want to re-engineer Google Maps, right? Because if you are somebody at Uber, you're not going to start by mapping the entire world, all the streets and everything, right? You want to use an existing service for that. And initially, Uber did use Google Maps. I don't think they're using them right now, but they did. And that's how Uber solved the problem, right? So if you want to use, for example, any kind of maps, any kind of like map service in your hack today, you don't have to care about that. You don't have to write all of that. You can just use an existing service. And the way you're going to interact with that is through an API. And again, an API is just a way defined by everyone that, this is how we should normally structure our communication with a service. Cool. So let's get started. Let's make our first API call, actually. You guys can go to this link to get this really weird thing. If you don't want to really type this huge string out, just go to the Spaceman link. And I would like everyone to install Postman, which you can get from this link. It's platform independent, doesn't matter if you're running Windows, Mac, Linux. I'm going to give everyone a couple of minutes to download it. If you have any questions, let me know, raise a hand, I'll stop, and then we can discuss the question. For you coming in, you just want to download this, go to this website and download, and you want to go to this link and copy this huge string, unless you feel like typing it out. If anyone's having any trouble installing, let me know. I can probably help you out.
So what do we do with the website that we get to with the paste bin?
Oh, for now you wait.
Okay.
Just copy it and wait. Do you have it set up already? Postman? Okay. Was that a question at the back? Yeah.
I'm just wondering, what are you pretty much covering in this workshop?
So I plan on covering how REST APIs are designed and how you call them, how you work with them. Not only through like using actual HTTP URLs, but then we'll look at a random API, and then we'll also look at another example, programmatic access to APIs. So,
Okay, are you planning on covering like OAuth servers?
so that's something I think is too much for an introductory talk. However, I am mentoring, and I will give a short talk on what by the end of it. So if you have any problems with OAuth, I'm actually going to just let you know where to find me on Slack. And let me know, and I'll come help you. Because OAuth can be real annoying.
Can I get your name right now?
Sure, DHRUV. True. I haven't signed up for mentors up yet, but I will be after this workshop, but you can still Slack.
Okay, sorry, could you repeat that?
DHRUV. For those coming in, you want to go to this link, the Pastebin link, so you can copy this huge string. And I want you to go and download Postman from this website.
Roshan, nice to meet you. They told me that you're the only one in this one, so that's fine. How many roads did you skip? You told me not to worry about it.
You can skip that actually. At the bottom of that the pop-up, there's probably a skip button. You don't really need to do that.
You just need to tell them to give the feedback.
But they will allow you menu.
You can tell them to go on that website and
Yeah, you should see something something like this. Well, something like that. It'll probably pop up.
just tell them.
I'm getting
Yeah, just close the, you see that window? Just close that. Yeah.
What's your last name?
Jauhar, J-A-U-H-A-R.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I do not expect there to be another Jauhar.
There's like 5.
Oh man, I thought my name was unique. Yeah? Yeah, you're fine. Oh, that will get to that. So you have to actually change it. Yeah. Don't worry about it. How many people have not set up Postman? You don't need to do anything, like as long as you can open it, just fine. How many of you? Awkward silence, but we kind of need that for the rest of the workshop. If anyone needs help or doesn't know what to do, raise your hand. Yeah. You don't yet. So ignore step 2 for now. I'm going to do this with everyone. My bad. Yeah, I'll do it with everyone. Don't worry. As long as you can open the software, like everything's fine. Are the people who just joined us, are they done with this? Is anyone not done with installing Postman so far? Okay, quickly do that, please. Right. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on. Those who are still installing, you can follow this. It's not going to be too hard. I hope you do catch up. Right, so most of you would probably see something like this. Forget this part for now. I've already made the call because I was testing it out. So most of you probably have this, right? You have get and you have this link over here. Am I correct? Cool. Yeah? Is there a question?
sorry, I don't have the link.
You don't? Oh, which link?
The link on the top.
Oh, you can go to Pastebin.
Sorry.
You can go to the Pastebin link, and then you can just copy that. This link should be there,
Oh.
so you don't have to write this this out. Again, sorry for this insane URL. I wrote this API in a rush, and I didn't have time to buy a domain to make it something nice like I don't know, hacktonotworkshop.com or something. So this part of it remains enterprise AWS URL. But we really only we just care about parts from here almost always. So you can almost ignore this to be anything like maps.google.com or any other such thing. So don't be confused by that part. It's hideous. Right. Do you have that link now? Yeah.
The page has been removed.
Does that work? Did that work for everyone else? It's
Oh.
working. Maybe you copying something. I don't think it's case sensitive. I mean, I don't. Does it work? Okay, cool. Cool. For those joining us, just download the software called Postman. Bug the person next to you for the Facebook. Cool. Alright, so everyone should see something like a get over here, and we've probably pasted this link here so far. Right? And I'll explain everything that's happening, but I just want everyone to make their first call so that we can break the ice with APIs. So I want you to go to the drop down by clicking on get and change it to a post. Right? So now if you go in your body, I want you to write down your email over here. Now I put something down as test@gmail.com. So you know what? So this is a show of hands. Who knows what this is? What I've written in the body over there up top. Who knows what that is? What is it?
JSON?
Cool. How many over here know what JSON is? Alright, cool. How many know what HTTP is? Cool. We're going to learn all that today. And it's not that hard. Yeah?
Sorry, could you enlarge the text?
Oh, sure. I hope this works. Is that big enough?
Yeah.
Cool. Alright, so now if you're done with writing your email in this weird format, I want you to click send and you should get something back. Does everyone get something like this back? Everyone, as long as your email is different from anyone else in this room, you should get a unique key over there. Does this work for everyone? Cool. Okay, I don't see enough hands. Are you having problems with it? Okay, you know what? I can see the problem. Oh, so you want to drag and straight?
Yeah, I feel like 1, 2,
Maybe when you clicked on this, you saw something like this. So when you click on body, click on raw, and then write this down. Cool. So if you click on send, again, you should get something unique like that. And I'll tell you why that is important. But the fact is, you've all made your first API call by now, so good on you. Right. Is everyone done with that? Show of hands. Okay, you're done, you're done, you're done. You guys still having some problems. Do you know what to do? Okay, cool. Right. Did it work for you guys at the front? Okay, alright. How many have not installed Postman so far? Just curious, show of hands. Because then I'll wait for a couple more minutes. Okay, cool. Did it work for you guys? Did it work? Okay, cool. Right, so again, everyone should see something like this. Does everyone see something like this? Again, show of hands, last call. Thank you. Alright. So, today, for most of this workshop, we're going to work with a to-dos API, a to-dos list API. I wrote this API. It's very simple and it helps understand what the normal flow of most APIs is going to be like. So, the to-dos list is very simple. The API will revolve around you defining a task, which is just a string, buy eggs, I lent money, $20 to somebody else, you can just write anything over there. And you have a record of whether the task has been completed or not. And that's pretty much what the API is. So, let's understand what happened over here. So when you're working with APIs, the reason I went through this is that most websites require you to do a sign up. And when you sign up, they will provide you with an API key. And this key serves two important purposes. This key will be used to authenticate that it is really you, because no one else should be having that key. And this key helps identify that it is you. So if everyone in this room makes the call, the subsequent API calls that we're going to be making, they're going to do it with their own API key. So this way, the service understands that it is you who's making that call. So let's make our first to-dos call. So you had user over there. I want you to just change that to to-dos. And we're gonna leave this option still as post, and I'll come back to what that means. And let's change this to task. And you can define your task here. Comma. Sorry, what? Yeah. Over here. Right over here. So where we had user, we changed that to to-dos. Again, soon I will explain everything, what's going on. And we already checked. And false. Cool. So you guys don't have to write that exact task. This part, you can change to whatever you feel like. And once you're done with that, once again, click on send. Oh, I forgot one important step. So let's go back. User. And change our body back to email. Right, I want everyone to copy this. We'll be using this for the rest of the workshops, and again, I'll explain why that's important. Has everyone reached this step? Has everyone gotten their API key so far? Raise your hands, please. Okay, most of you have. Cool. So now I want you guys to go into headers. It's right to the left of body. You guys see it? And over here, just right, in the key part over here, API underscore key. And for the value, you just copy and paste what you got from your previous request over there. And again, this serves two purposes. This is how, whenever any of you make a call, the service is going to know that it's actually you, and it serves as authentication that, you know, this is secure, no one else is going to have it, so this is how you get security in this service. Cool. So now we can go to body, and again, my bad, change that to to-dos. And change this to task. Checked. And put that as false for now. Cool. And once you're done with that, again, it remains post over here. Your link, we only changed from user to to-dos. We added an API key in our headers, which we don't know what it is yet, but that's fine. And we write this in our body this time. And we click on send, and you should get something like that. Right, how many of you got that so far? Raise your hands. Cool. People who are having trouble, where are you stuck? Raise your hand and ask. Yeah?
It's showing a bad body provided.
Bad body provided. That means you have a mistake somewhere. Are you sure you're using the right spelling for check?
Yeah.
Are you sure that you've done it exactly like this? There is a comma right there after task, yes. Yeah. Okay, don't mind, I'd love to have a look. So I'll go over this once more because it's a bit tricky. Again, we changed this to user from user to to-dos. We let this remain post. We went to our headers, which is to the left of body, and wrote API key over here, and we pasted the API key we had received before over here. We went to the body, wrote something like this down. You can change this part to whatever you want and click on send, and you would get something like this back. So how many of you have reached this point again? Show of hands. Okay, cool. So I can move on. Right. So first of all, again, since more people have joined, I will just have another show of hands. How many of us know JSON? Okay, cool. So half of us don't. So I'll explain it very quickly. So JSON is nothing but a simple format which looks something like this. And it's simply a way to give key value pairs, which is you can define something like a key here and a value here. And all JSON is always encoded in curly braces like that. So this is, and you have all these key value pairs comma separated. And the format is very simple. Another example of something like JSON would be if I were to have another item here, right? You can have anything over here. This is still valid JSON. It's a key and a value. And this is kind of how you provide, or how you talk with the service and give it information. So it's very simple to use. If you have any questions about JSON, honestly, search online. It's very easy to understand. All right. So let's understand what we've done so far. So when we're working with APIs, right? So a good analogy to how we work with APIs would be how you work with a file on your laptop. So this huge link over here is nothing but like a file directory which is on your laptop. For example, if you have a file saved on your desktop, it will be, if you're on a Mac, it will be like user / your username / desktop / folder name / file, right? And that's sort of how the internet works as well. That's how you locate things on the internet, right? This is like identifying a website, right? And then you're accessing a resource which looks very similar to how you have a file system in your laptops, right? Because you have /v1, which is like accessing a folder, and /todos. In this case, it just refers to an endpoint, which is nothing but a fancy word for basically the string you see up there. So when you have a file on your machine, right, you typically care about 4 operations. You want to create a file, you want to edit an existing file, you want to delete the file, and you want to update, create, read, update, delete, yeah, and you want to delete the file, right? These are the 4 main operations you work with. And that's pretty much how it works with APIs on the internet. So for example, when we're working with this to-dos API, right, we're going to create tasks, something like this, which we've already done. We're going to modify them, we can delete them. So yeah, so in the world of internet, yeah, we call these operations CRUD, which is short for create, read, update, and delete. So a lot of you noticed that we had, when you started Postman, you had something like get, right? And we changed that to post because in the lingo of APIs, that's how you create an object, right? So when you're making an API call, you have a couple of things involved. So you have your resource, right? Which, as I said, looks something like your file system. This is where you explain that, you know what, I want to go to this service, and again, this could be maps.google.com, this looks really ugly, sorry about that again, /API/version1, / some location or something like that, right? And that's simply what you want to refer to. It's simply that. Then we define our data, right? So when we wanted to interact with this service, we wanted to provide it some information to create a new task for your to-dos list. And that data was simply in the form of JSON and was simply two key value pairs, right? The task you want to create and check, that is whether you've completed that task or not. And then we have something called headers. And in the header we define an API key and its value, again something like a key and value pair. And the reason these are separate is because it's a separation of concerns. Because in our header over here, we have defined our authentication method and the means by which we identify ourselves. And in the data we provide in the body is more the logic of what we're going to do. So it doesn't make sense to put your API key there because it will be exposed. So that's why when we make a call on the internet, it lets us do different things. In fact, if you thought you've never made an API call, every time you go to a website, what you actually do is a GET request on that website. So if you have, for example, google.com, actually I can probably do that here and you can probably see the result. So you can do google.com. You've got to get and make a send request. You should actually get this back, and this is exactly what your browser gets, and then it knows what to do with it. And that's pretty much how APIs work in general. So if you have to-dos and if you've done and reached this step, I want you to change post to get once more. And that's all you need to do, change the post to a get. You don't have to edit anything else. And click on the send. And you should get something like that back. How many of you see that? So, as you might have noticed, this time we got something in curly braces, but then we again got something in the brackets. And that is nothing but notation for a list. So again, if you're unfamiliar with JSON, in JSON, apart from having key value pairs enclosed inside curly braces, you can have several of these, which are again enclosed in the braces. So you could have, for example, a comma over here, and you can have something which looks exactly like this once again. And that will be nothing but a list of these key value pairs. And this is how most services talk to each other at the end of the day. So how about we create another one? So you again change this to post. You leave your header as it is, your API key is right there. You go to body and you write something else, anything else. And once again you click on send. And you should get another thing back. And if you go and get, just change the post to a get once again and click on send. You should see two things over there. If you've done this more than once, you can see more than two things over there as well. Make sense? Cool. And as you can see, JSON format is very simple. You've grouped a bunch of key value pairs, they're comma separated in lists, so you can get multiple of them back. Does that make sense? So far, we've worked with an API. Honestly, you guys have done the hardest part to understand an API, but you guys need more context still. This is still, I'm sure this is all, I'm sure everyone's still a bit lost, like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I hope you're feeling that. Otherwise, I'm a very good teacher, and I'm surprised if you're not feeling that. So let's actually look at this, right? So I described that this is something like APIs work in a way similar to you're working with a file on your machine. So in most APIs, again, you have something called the base URL, right? And again, this could be something like maps.google.com. And for us, it's that ugly string. And again, this is not going to be the same for everyone, but chances are you're going to see something like this. You're probably going to have something like an API version. And again, this is like we've referred to a machine. The base URL is like, I want to talk to this service. And then you have a slash, then you have a v1, which is like you're going into another folder, which is like you're accessing or you're trying to tell the service, this is what I want to work with. So you say, I want version 1 of the API. You can have more versions. And we've already worked with user, right, when we created our API key. But the real API, but that was just simply, I was lazy and I wanted everyone, to get an API key quickly without having a login page. But this is the more important part. This is how, when you go online, you're most likely going to find information about how an API is. It's going to describe an endpoint, right? So apart from that base URL, we work with to-dos, right? And we've made these two requests already, get and post. And if you remember, get is to, again, read information or retrieve it, right? In the CRUD, create, read, update, delete. So the get request maps to simply reading that information, like printing out what's in the directory. And post is the internet rules lingo for creating something new. And we've already done those two things. So, back to the API. So there's another thing though, right? You will find this to be a very common thing in APIs. So let's go back to Postman and see what we actually have there. So if any of you, so I'm sure all of you already have this back. If you notice that when you made this call, all you provided was task and check. But when you made this call, you got something more back. You got this for free. You got a task ID and updated app. And this is again very common in the world of APIs. Because when you made that call, that post call, to make this, which looks something like this, right? I'm going to make this again, just for the heck of it. You only sent 2 things, but you got 3 back. And this is important because once you create something, you need a way to refer to it once again. Because how are you ever going to come back to this task? So that's why whenever you do something, like whenever you create something on using an API, almost always you're going to get some kind of ID back. And this ID will help you refer to this again. So if you want to just read this again, or if you want to edit it, or you want to delete this, this is how you're going to refer to it. So just like we have our API key, which uniquely refers to us as a user using the service, this task ID helps us refer to this particular object we've created online. So if you copy that for whichever task you have, any of those, and you go to to-dos, and you again a backslash, and you paste this, and change it to a get. Right? Again, to-dos / you pasted the task ID, you change from post to get, and then click on ascend. You should just get that task back. And that's all what this task ID was about, because you need a way to, again, refer to this thing you've created. Does that make sense? Is anyone terribly lost so far? Cool. Does anyone have any questions so far? All right. So, again, back to this. So this over here is what you just referred to when we changed the ID. That's the curly braces there is simply a way to say that you can put whatever you want there. It's mutable. It's not like to-dos which you cannot change. If you change to-dos, you're going to get something else. You're going to get an error. So we can actually now, so we've done get, we've done post. Let's try to make a change in our API. And so we get to go. We change get to a put this time. Again, I have not changed the resource over there, or the URL if you prefer, right? This ID remains the same, and I'm making the change for this ID only, this task ID over there. And I go to my body, right? And you can paste that as is. But you want to change something. You actually want to remove created app. Why? Because most APIs won't let you change everything. Because this is for their internal record keeping as well. These things you see are stored in a database somewhere. And it would be very dangerous if you were able to change created app. So the API won't let you do that. You can try. I think it would throw an error. But you know what? Do it. Bad body provided, right. So there are certain fields that when you create, the API won't let you change. And those are really easy to identify sometimes. For example, created app, again, as I said, that's logic that the people who made this API probably depend on, right? Because if they want to do some metrics, they want to understand what their users are doing, right? They want to see if you as a particular user made a lot of events at a particular time of day, they're going to need that. And they don't want you to change that. Same goes for task ID. They don't want you to change task ID because again, that would be very dangerous. So you can delete that. You can delete created app, right? And same goes, same goes for updated app. Just as created app tells us that when was this task created, once we modify it, updated app should change to tell us when it was last updated. Again, we don't want anyone to change that. And And if you realize, we end up back with exactly what we used to create this. And this is something that's going to be common. Sometimes you can send more information, but not necessarily always. And let's change checked from false to true. Let's just say we finish this weird task. And click on send. And again, I've changed it to a put. This remains the same. I've changed checked to true and left everything else as the same. Our header still has the API key, and we will need this API key always, because again, that's how the API knows it's you who's making this change. Because someone else could very well create the task with the same with the same name and same everything, but the way that's going to be differentiated is with the API key.
So you mentioned that can sometimes create.
Yes.
Is that if you mess up this right here and provide?
Yeah, so that's, I was going to get to that, but I'll get to that before. That's an excellent question. So, the bad thing is, people aren't very good at writing APIs, it turns out. Most good companies will write good APIs, but there's a lot of APIs out there which are not really well designed. So put on the internet has shaky behavior sometimes. Now, whenever you create something, I urge you to use post. Because what happens is with put is actually used for create or update on the internet. And why that's dangerous is that sometimes you can just keep using put, and you may not realize that you may have overwritten something. So put would, if I make this, so again, if you notice, if I change put to a post in this sense, right? The only difference is that this is still there. This was earlier only to-dos, and I did not have this. Otherwise, this looks almost the same. This API call is the same as that. Sometimes what happens with put is that if I leave the task ID over there, it would actually create that for you. And that can be dangerous if you use this with put, because you could again write something over there and unintentionally overwrite what you've done. So it's always better to use post to create and put to only update. Because if you keep using put, you may accidentally overwrite what you've done, and there may not be a way of getting that back. So if you've changed this to a put, left everything as is, and made that change from check to true, again, if you click on send, you will realize that we get everything almost the same back, except this time we've actually made the change in that in this item that we've created, in this task. What we get back is again true, that is the change we made. And the created and updated app have changed as well. And this will be something common, you will see this again, APIs try to provide you this extra information because that will just help you in the long run. Right? And that's how you change something online. And almost all APIs are going to revolve around these operations of create, update, delete, and modify. And this is how you do it. This is again a very simple example of a to-dos API, right? But if you had something, for example, a bit more complicated, and again, this is what our API looks like, and it's very simple. But the APIs you're going to see in the real world are often more complex and have more things going on. Does everyone see something like this, like have their check turned to true or whatever change they made? Show of hands. Cool, you guys are doing awesome. And again, it's a no-brainer. What if you want to delete this, right? What if you're done with this? We don't want, like, when you have a to-dos task list, right? You don't want all the tasks you finish always lying around. You're done with it, you want to remove it. So, very intuitively, change the put to a delete, right? And notice, so far, we've always added the task ID over there. Because again, this is how you refer that we're going to work with the specific task that we created, right? And you send it. There you go. And throughout what you were doing this, right? What we were doing was a request-response cycle. You send a request over there, and this is the response you get back from the API. So even when you delete, and again, this is going to be very common, APIs will typically send you what just deleted back. Because that's helping you out. Because what if you accidentally, you realize you're writing code, deleted something, but you deleted it. So the API is nice enough often to give this back to you, so that in case you still need to save something, you have it. And that's just good practice. So yeah, you guys have covered most of this. Okay. So a little more on this. So at this point, we're actually mostly done with most of this workshop. We're going to move on to examples soon, but there's couple of more things I wanted to talk about. So if you notice, we should see something like this over here. Does everyone see status 200 OK? Do you know where I'm pointing at? Over there. So when you work, and again, let's do a small recap, right? So the way you work with APIs is this way. You refer to a resource, right, which was this, this URL over here. And this is how we define what we're working with. When we create a task, that task can be thought of as a file on the computer, a resource. And we refer to it using this. Then we define our intention. What do we want to do with this task? We want to create, delete, update, or modify it, right? And we did that with get, post, put, and delete. And then we define what we want to do in the body. So for example, if you're creating something, right, we send something like this, which this is the actual data we care about working with this service. And the thing is, this is often not enough because you want to provide additional information, like your authentication, like your API key. But that doesn't, if you're writing a to-dos API, it doesn't feel very nice to have your API key in there, right? So the HTTP request lets you have another place to send some more information to the service, which is headers. And the header we define our API key, and again, the API key is what lets the service know that it's you and that, that it's basically you who's working on it, and it gives you your isolated environment. So all of you could make the same task with the same name and the same everything, but because your API key is different, the server knows that it's different people working with this. So the same request, if we now change it to a get once again, and we get rid of this the task ID we had, right, and make a send request. Notice that we're back to these things. Now, I made the request thrice, so I had this actually 2 times. You guys should probably see it only one of those things. So I'm going to quickly just get to where you guys are. And hopefully you see something like this. Because we have 2 tasks, we remove one of them, and again we're back to one of these things. And that's mostly how all APIs are going to work. So a few last things before we move on to examples is status codes. So when you made this request and you got a response, right? So you send some information back. The server also has the capability of sending information back. The server also provides you with headers, it turns out. And sometimes this is important. Hopefully you don't have to work with this, but sometimes you do. The server also gave something back in its body, which was what pretty much you want to work with. And the server gave you a status code. And this status code tells you, this is the server's way of telling you of what it thought went down. So when you see 200, that means everything is fine. The service, you interacted with the service and the service sent you something back exactly how it wanted. If you see 400s, that means you made a mistake, the server understands that you made a mistake, and it's letting you know that you fucked up. And if you see a 500, that means you were not at fault, and it's the server which made a mistake. In this case, you were not at fault. You will also see 300s almost never. I don't even want to get down into what it is, but you almost don't have to be bothered with that. If you see a 300 with an API, it's garbage, move on. Leave it, try something else. Hopefully you never have to see that. Alright. Done this, Alright. So, so far, I've explained to you what an API is, right? And I've shown you how things work on Postman. But I've also sort of lied to you in a way. The unfortunate thing is that most APIs work exactly like this, but they want to make your life easier. So they don't want you to always, work with these URLs and, have logic in your program to, add something to the end of this, like a task ID and everything. So good APIs, or rather the ones which have resources to actually make a proper product, will give you some kind of library in the language of your choice. Now you can always work with this, and almost every API doc is going to give you information on how to make calls like this, and it's going to provide you with some form of, where is it? It's going to give you some sort of notion of this always. Because even those libraries behind the scene are really wrappers around this. They're doing the same thing. They're just trying to make your life easy. So I want to show you something, an actual API doc, and what it looks like. How many of you know what Stripe is? Whew, one person, all right. So how many of you know what PayPal is? Cool. Stripe is PayPal 2018, pretty much. So Stripe is a service, and actually, you know, if you're trying to create something and you want to take money from someone, I highly recommend this actually. It's an excellent service. I would love to work there someday. And they have some of the best API docs I've ever seen. In fact, this format up there has inspired several companies to adopt a similar API doc format. Unfortunately, those companies are all companies with money. You're talking about Google, Facebook, stuff like that. So if you find an obscure API, you probably won't get it as nice as this, but they should have the same information. And the reason I choose Stripe, not only is it good, but it's easy to understand transactions, I think, because that transcends any language barrier, any kind of logic, because we all understand that when a transaction happens, there may be a customer and I may charge them, right? So with that, I just want to show you what the API looks like. So if you were to make it work with Stripe, it's a Stripe API, right? In order to charge somebody some money, right, you have to first create a customer. And the way it works is something like this. So the documentation is going to describe everything. So again, notice that they still use JSON, right? But this may be too small, but that's fine. You don't really need to understand what's happening here. Once again, so what I want to however highlight is even they use something like ID, right? Because every time you see something like JSON wrapped in this curly braces, it's like you're referring to a certain task, just like we had in our to-dos API, right? Just as we had something back, they give you this thing back. And it's again simply JSON. And how do you refer to it? Again, you have an ID over there. And they have defined what each of these key value pairs mean, right? So you have what ID means, what object means, what account balance means, and all of that. And good APIs will provide you with this information. So if you go to the top of the API, right, it again define the base URL, which is something we've already seen with the, I'm forgetting what that is. Again, the base URL, right? As I said, this looks ugly, but very simple with Stripe. api.stripe.com, right? If you want to create a customer over there, for example, right? This is just them defining what JSON looks like, right? Again, they define that. You do a post request, version 1 of their API, on the endpoint customers, right? Just like the resources we've talked about. And this is something what you would get. And again, as I said, I've lied to you so far because it's important to understand how this works. In Python, for example, if that's your language of choice, they let you do all of the post requests we did in Postman using these few lines of code. Right? You import the library over here, you set your API key, and then you stripe.customer.create. And again, you'll notice these keywords pop up again: create, update, read, delete, or put, post, stuff like that. And you simply define descriptions and whatever this is, but you see how they've abstracted your work. So when you're going to be working with libraries, most likely when you're working with an API, you probably want to work with their API because it will make your life easy. But it's important to know how that their API is doing the same requests we're making. If I open the source code for this, they're going to make the same HTTP request that we've been making so far. And again, if this is again, they have for PHP, if you're somebody who likes writing Java, they have a library written for this. Does anyone have any questions so far, or any doubts, or any curiosity? Yeah.
So I noticed that it says Java, but I'm just wondering, does that work for Android, or is that a separate thing? Do you need an SDK for that? Or?
So if you go to Java, they provide you with a library. So as long as you can install that library, and I'm pretty sure you can install that on any, whenever you're writing Java for Android, it should work. Again, you can always fall back to making these raw requests. You can always do that, and some APIs don't have libraries. So you will have to do this. But probably if you're using some popular API or any API given today at any workshop today, for any price, they will probably have documentation like this. So yeah. Another thing I haven't mentioned so far, and this is something that's getting deprecated, but if you've ever made a Google search, right? I'll just search for API, for example. Let's see if I can. Again, you don't have to do this. I just want to find a place where I can put all of that. Can you guys see that? So when I did that, all the browser really did was a GET request like that. Pretty much with that. But there's something more going on here, which I haven't talked about, which is parameters. So remember, I've said that whenever we talk to a service online, we provided information in a few different ways. We have the body, where we typically write our main business logic. We have headers, where we provide information which we need to send, but it doesn't really belong somewhere else. And then we have, we define our intent with this, and then the resource we're working with. But it turns out there is one more way we can give more information. And sometimes APIs prefer to use this notation. So over here, Google.com is your base URL, right? Just as we have the weird looking Amazon URL I had above there. Then you have your, for the resource, again, as I said, it's like a file. You have search, which is the service you're working with. And then you have this question mark. And what this question mark does, is it starts a sequence of key value pairs once again. So this is what was used prior to JSON becoming popular. And all this is this format is question mark, and from now onwards you write source, which is your key, which is something like checked over here, and then you have HP, which is your value, which is something like false in this regard. And then you write an ampersand, and then you write your next key, your next value, and so on and so forth. Just like you did in JSON. This is what was used before, JSON got popular later, and most APIs would use JSON now. Some APIs may require for you to use this, and it's very simple again. Question mark, key equals value, ampersand key equals value, till you're done. And if you're working with raw APIs and you have to do this, you are most likely going to have a library which will do this for you. So all you need to do is define some parameter, and it will form this for you. So no matter which language you're using, if you're going to be working with this, like the raw strings of an API, because they don't have a library, you should find the most popular, the most recommended library for your language to work with the internet. For Python, it's requests, because that's what I code mostly in. I don't know much about other languages, but a simple Google search should suffice. Or you can search request for Java, request for Ruby, or whichever language you prefer. Do we have time? Does anyone have any other questions? Yeah?
This is wondering, so the request URL like HTTPS like whatever it is, right? Do you just pull that out from in there, or do you just how do you remember the address?
Which address?
Like the one we sent post HTTPS DEZ.
Oh, so that's the base URL again. So I made this API for last Hackathon, like when I gave this talk before as well, and I chose to use AWS to write this. And by default, I didn't have time to set up a domain,
Okay.
so AWS gave me an ugly one for free, and that's what it looks like. So again, this would be something neat like api.strike.com or maps.google.com, and then so on and so forth, instead of that ugly thing on Amazon AWS.com.
Okay, so it's like the address of an API then. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so again, it's like a file system,
Okay.
right? It's like the way whenever you put a backslash, you're trying to define further into the service what aspect you want to define. Okay, you first.
So I came a little late, but I don't know if you talked about OAuth.
I'm going to say this again. So I don't want to cover OAuth in this talk because I think this is enough for now. However, a lot of you may encounter OAuth, and I'm also a mentor for this workshop. I haven't signed up for the Mentor Hub yet. I will after this workshop. You can reach me on Slack for the time being. My name is Dhruv Jar, D-H-R-U-V. Slack me and I'll come help you with OAuth. All right? You have a question? Oh, that's a completely different talk. Again, if you want help, reach out to me on Slack. I'll sign up on Mentor Hub. For those who are super curious, this is some of the code which actually implemented your API there, and it's very simple. I deploy it using AWS. I can help people write their own APIs. Again, if you're curious, this is how we've been working. This is the code to actually create a task. And it may look complicated, but again, if any one of you actually wants to create an API, reach me on Slack. My name's Dhruv, Dhruv Jar, J-A-U. Probably search me as Jar, J-A-U-H-A-R, because there's 5 Dhruvs apparently. And I will help you. Any other questions? Thank you.